Hello and welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina. And it is Monday. It's getting towards evening time. I'm at my house as always on Mondays, and I thought we'd talk about a thing in crochet called magic ring. It is really great when you're trying to start with a spiral or like a ring of stitches and go out from there, which can be great for the top of a hat or the beginning, the crown or the base of amigurumi, little animals. And kind of the older way to do it is to chain 3 or 4 and slip stitch and then go into that chain. And that can leave a really big hole that you can always try to sew up later if you like. But some patterns are shifting to magic ring, and some you can create magic ring instead of following those instructions and get a really tight seal at the top. So let's get to it. Crochet magic ring. This can be a great way to start a piece that needs to have a tight circle at the top, and we can go over in pictures and in yarn what that means. Some older instructions, they don't have to be older, but sometimes instructions will tell you to try to chain 3 or 4, slip stitch into the base of the chain to form a ring. But that can leave a hole in the top that you have to sew up later or deal with. So, magic ring can be really cool. You just need to get the hang of it. Here are my tips. I start wrapping around the fingers on my left hand. And I recommend starting with 2 wraps around your fingers for a more secure base. There are ways to do it with only 1 wrap, and we'll take a look. We're really talking about wrapping around your whole hand to get a big loop that's going to become really tight later. Hard to describe it in words, but your hook is going to go under those 2 wraps to scoop the working yarn under it with a twist. So you're going to go under and pull it back. That is much easier to do and show you, so just keep that in mind. We're going under the loops to pull the working yarn through. Then you're going to chain to the proper height for your stitches. So for example, if you're making a double crochet, you would chain 2 or 3 to get to the right height. You make all your stitches into that ring, and then part of the magic is how to pull that ring tight. If needed, what I often do is I do it 1 loop at a time. I pull on the tail, but instead of trying to pull the tail to tighten up both loops, it could get stuck before that happens. I pull the tail, it's going to start to tighten the first loop, so I stop. I use that first loop to tighten up the second loop, the thing furthest away from the tail. And then I return to pulling the tail to tighten everything up completely into a really tight base. That might sound pretty crazy. Let's look at some pictures I've drawn, and then let's do it with real yarn. Okay, so here's my drawing of wrapping the yarn around my hand. If the tail is here, it goes around my hand twice. If anything, we can start, so this is wrap yarn twice. This is all assuming you hold your hook in your right hand. I'm left-handed, but I hold my hook in the more traditional way. So wrap the yarn twice around your left hand. Let's start color coding this a little bit. We've got the tail and this first loop I'm going to color the same color. And then there's a second loop. And once it's gone twice around my hand, I let the working yarn go over my hand for a 3rd time. So there's 2 complete loops, and there's a 3rd drape of the working yarn that goes to the ball. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to put the crochet hook goes under those loops and catches the working yarn. It will look like this. It goes under and catches it. So again, if we keep our colors, This is still on my hand, by the way. We've got our tail that creates our first loop. We have the second loop. And the crochet hook has gone under them. Under those, over the working yarn to catch it in the hook. Now the hook is going to scoop and twist that under. So step 3, it's going to pull it back under and swivel as it comes. This is when it can come off your hand. So step 3, if you pull it under and twist as you go, you will have a loop on your hook that has come through those loops on your hand. You can also take your left hand out. Let's separate that stuff. So here are those 2 loops that were on my hand up here. The working yarn is now a loop. We can still consider it going off from behind. The tail has still created this first loop. The 2 loops are still here. Now is when you want to chain your height and do all of your stitches are going to go into this hole. Let's call it the center of the loops, the center of those 2 loops. So this is what it will look like after I've done them. It'll stretch the whole thing out, but we're going to tighten it up. So if I'm going to color code this, I still have my tail here. That is one of these loops, makes the first loop. I can still see the outside of these 2 loops, half of them. The other half is taken up with that beginning pull through and chain. We'll make that the color of the working yarn. And then trying to identify, I don't know if I have enough colors for all of these stitches, but we could say I've made a series of double crochets here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. For some patterns, they might count your beginning chain as a stitch, and others they might not. But if we still want to think of our working yarn that started over here and has made all these stitches, there's the working yarn again. So the next step to tighten this is to tighten these loops. And if you pull on just the tail, it might tighten the next loop. It might not pull both of them before it gets a little tight and stuck. So step 5, tighten your loops. If needed, do them one at a time. I will show you that over with the real yarn, how to distinguish. If you pull on this tail, that one will tighten. Don't pull it all the way. Yank on this one to tighten the inside one, and then pull on the tail to finish. It will end up looking like this. It will be really tight. You won't be able to see this hole anymore. It will be completely closed off. But if we try, I don't know if I drew all the stitches in here, but what we can try to identify is we've got the beginning chain. you'll see the tops of the stitches on the outside edge. I think they'll be easier to color than the inside of it, but I'll see what I can go back and fill in. I might have drawn a couple extras. Usually there's a few more in there to make it go all the way around. This assumes a couple more stitches to really cross the boundaries. Let's put those in a new color. If I'd kept going, perhaps I would have gone back to my original colors. But these will circle around, and then you can do a slip stitch to connect this to the top there, and you have a disc. Slip stitch it together, and you can go on from there. Let's take a look with real yarn. So I'd like to show you what would happen if we did the quote-unquote old-fashioned way of just chaining 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it will say slip stitch to the base of your chain to make a ring. There's my cute tight little ring. And then it will say you're doing double crochets, it will say chain 3 and put 11 more double crochets into this hole. So let's see what that would look like. That is probably the right number, and if I go up here to do my slip stitch join, I've got a pretty big hole there, and apart from sewing it shut later, nothing's going to change that. So let's see what the same thing would be if we did a magic ring for it. Okay, so let's take a look at magic ring in practice. So I'm going to hold the yarn in my left hand, tails out there. I'm going to wrap it once. I'm going to wrap it twice. Doesn't matter if they cross over each other or not. Maybe we'll keep them separated just for convenience sake. And then I'm going to let it drape over if you need to. Here's a little trick to keep it locked. If we do it around 3 of my fingers, once, twice, and then when I do the third one, I'm going to lock the working yarn in place with my pinky. So these are my wraps, this is my working yarn. Now I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to come under these guys and raise it up so I can catch the working yarn. So I've gone under my loops and I want to catch the one that's locked down by my pinky. Now here's the fun part. We're going to pull that back under and twist. Let me show you that one more time. We start from the beginning. Wrap once is already done. Well, let's leave my pinky free for this. Wrap once, wrap twice. Lock down my working yarn with my pinky, working yarn closer to my knuckles over here. Take my hook under the wraps on top of, I'm going to catch that working yarn. I'm going to pull it under, and when I just make it under enough, I'm going to twist up so that it is caught pretty much as a loop. It's not necessarily super secure right now, but we're good for the moment. I'm going to leave my tail hanging down. I have this big open hole here right now. I'm going to grab my working yarn, get my tension set up, and I'm going to chain 2 or 3. That first chain locks it in place on this ring, right? 2, maybe I'll do 3 because I'm going to do some double crochets here. All right, the rest of my double crochets are going to go into this hole. So I'm going to yarn over, go into the hole, and complete my stitches. This might feel a little weird because it's big and loose. It's not a tight hole to go into. I finish my double crochet by doing a set of 2 and a set of 2. I've got my chain, got 1 double crochet. I'm going to do like a good 12. I'm going to count this as my first one, so that's 2. Go into the hole, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2, whoops, yarn over, go through 2. At this point, I can probably leave, I don't have to be wrapping it around my tail. Leave my tail hanging, but I'm still going to go around these 2 loops. And I'm going to keep going until I have a good dozen on here. Get some free yarn here. And see if they get further away. You can slide it in. You can have it ringing this whole thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can slide them around this ring. 5. 6. 7. 8. See how it's getting super stretched out. That's okay. I'm still going into that hole. 9. Still going into this same big hole. 10. I'm putting them next to each other. 11. 12. Now I have a gigantic hole there right now, right? I'm going to slide them close to each other because I want to see what's going on with these 2 loops, because I want to tighten this up now. You can do it with your hook in it, or you can take your hook out. If you pull your loop really big, nothing should happen to it. We don't want to lose any of these because we're about to make this tight enough we can't jam any more in. If I start pulling on the first one, I have 2 loops here. Let's see what happens. If I start pulling on my tail, I'm going to get them all nice and tight. This loop here just pulled tighter. See that? That means this is the loop that is closest to the tail. I actually want to tighten this one up first if I can. So I'm going to start pulling on the one that I just made tight. One side or the other, one's going to pull on the tail, one is going to pull on this inside loop. I'm going to pull and make that inside loop really, really tight. I still have this big loop, which is attached to the tail. Now that I have this big loop, I can pull, in theory, on the tail, and it will tighten up that second loop. So now I have this super tight. There still might be a little bit of air in there, but that's because I'm doing this with a really bulky yarn. I'm going to put my hook back in, and I'm going to try to see where the first tall stitch is right here. Here's my chain, here's my tall stitch. First stitch with the top loop there. And I'm going to slip stitch that together. Look how pretty that is. Okay, one more time I wanted to show you, see if we can get some good footage of if we have both of these, which just gives it more strength. how we're going to get them tightened. You can pull on the tail and just hope everything works out, but sometimes they pull unevenly and they don't both tighten up. So what I like to do is I pull on this and I see that this one right here just got smaller. And I think it went that way. By pulling on this side started to shrink. So I'm going to try pulling on the other side of the one that just got smaller. Yep, and it is pulling this other loop. I'm going to pull on the loop that's kind of in the middle. It's between the first loop and the tail. I'm going to pull on that one to get that first loop really, really tight. And then I'm going to pull on the tail. And if I'm gentle enough with it, it should start to, there, see, I had to wiggle it a little bit because these were wrapped around each other. Pulling on the tail is pulling that second loop tight. If you have a yarn that might possibly break, if it's yanked too much, all of this might be tough to do. But pulling on the tail is tightening that up until it is pretty secure. And then I can slip stitch the top of this shut, the outside edge. So this is the magic ring versus that chain 3. See the difference? So thanks so much for joining us on magic ring versus the traditional crocheted loop to start a ring crochet piece in. I hope that was helpful. Let us know what you'd like to see more videos on. I want to get back to some Papillon videos. I'd like to get back to some knitting videos and some life lessons from knitting and crochet. Let me know. I'll see what I can get to. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notifications. Drop me a comment on this video. And also consider going to Patreon. You can become one of our patrons and support the work that we do at Sundragon Art and Fiber. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Made the video late today. Is it dinner time? Yeah. Yeah? It's definitely not third dinner, but I might give you second dinner. Oh.